The door was unlocked, and that alone should have told me something was wrong, because Marin always locked it, every single time, even to take out the trash. But I was too tired to notice, too tired from a 16-hour shift that had drained every ounce of patience out of my body, and I pushed the door open expecting silence and darkness. Instead, I found her sitting on the kitchen floor at 2 in the morning, knees pulled to her chest, wrapped in my gray hoodie, the one with the frayed cuffs and the coffee stain on the pocket, and when she looked up at me with red, swollen eyes, my whole world tilted sideways. If this story moves something in you, if you still believe people deserve kindness and second chances even when they can't ask for them out loud, do me a favor before you keep reading. Hit like, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, share this with someone who needs a reminder that they're not alone, and subscribe to the channel because stories like this one deserve to reach people who need them most. Her name was Marin Cole, and she had been my roommate for exactly 8 months, ever since a mutual friend from college connected us when I posted online looking for someone to split rent on a 2-bedroom apartment near the hospital where I worked as a night shift nurse. She was quiet in the way that made you forget she was even in the room, the kind of quiet that isn't peaceful but guarded, like she was always bracing for something. She kept to herself, paid rent on time, left small sticky notes on the fridge reminding me whose turn it was to buy groceries, and for the first few months, that was the extent of our relationship. Polite, distant, functional. I didn't know much about her past. I knew she had grown up somewhere in Ohio, that she had transferred colleges twice, and that she flinched whenever anyone raised their voice, even in a joking way. I knew she worked as a freelance graphic designer from her bedroom, that she rarely had visitors, and that sometimes, late at night, I would hear her crying softly through the thin wall between our rooms, trying so hard to be silent that it broke my heart more than if she had sobbed openly. I never asked her about it. I told myself it wasn't my place, that everyone carries things they aren't ready to share, and that pushing would only make her retreat further. But that night, sitting on our kitchen floor in my hoodie with her knees pulled up and her mascara streaked down her cheeks, something in me refused to walk past her and pretend I hadn't seen. I set my bag down slowly, the way you'd approach something fragile, something that might shatter if you moved too fast, and I asked her as gently as I knew how, if she was okay. She looked down at the sleeves of my hoodie, at her own hands disappearing into fabric that wasn't hers, and she said the words that would change everything between us. "It smells like you, that's why." I didn't understand at first. I thought maybe she'd grabbed it by accident, that laundry day had left our clothes tangled together, that there was some simple, forgettable explanation. But she kept talking, and her voice cracked open like something long sealed, finally giving way under pressure. She told me that earlier that evening she'd gotten a phone call from her mother, the first one in almost 2 years, and that the call hadn't been the reconciliation she'd quietly hoped for every single day since they stopped speaking. It had been worse. Her mother had called to tell her that her father had passed away 3 weeks earlier, and that nobody had thought to tell her sooner because, in her mother's words, she had already made herself a stranger to the family. Marin told me in fragments, in a voice that kept catching on itself, that she had left home at 19 after years of walking on eggshells around a father who drank too much and a mother who chose silence over protection, and that leaving had been the only way she knew how to survive. But leaving hadn't erased the guilt. It had only buried it, and now here she was, 26 years old, orphaned by a father she both feared and grieved, disowned by a mother who blamed her for the distance, sitting on our kitchen floor because she couldn't stand to be alone in her room with those 4 walls closing in on her. She said that when the panic started clawing up her throat, she didn't know what to do with her hands, with her breathing, with the unbearable weight pressing on her chest, so she went looking for something, anything that felt safe. She found my hoodie draped over the couch, and without thinking she put it on because it smelled like the antiseptic soap I used at the hospital mixed with the cheap coffee I made every morning. And underneath all of that, it smelled like home in a way her actual childhood home never had. She said wearing it made her feel like someone was holding her, even though no one actually was. I sat down on the floor next to her right then. Not on a chair, not standing above her, but down at her level, because some conversations can't happen from a place of height. I didn't say anything profound. I didn't have some perfect healing sentence ready to fix years of trauma in one conversation. I just sat with her. I let the silence exist between us without rushing to fill it with reassurances that wouldn't have meant anything yet. After a while, she leaned her head against my shoulder, still wrapped in that hoodie, and we stayed like that until the sky outside our window started turning the pale gray of early morning. That night cracked something open between us, not in a dramatic, instantaneous way, but slowly, like a door that had been stuck for months finally loosening on its hinges. Over the following weeks, Maren started talking more. She'd linger in the kitchen while I made dinner, sharing small details about her work, laughing at something on her phone, and turning the screen toward me to share the joke. She started leaving her door open sometimes instead of always closed. She still wore my hoodie occasionally, and I never asked for it back, because I understood now that it wasn't about the hoodie at all. It was about having something solid to hold on to in a life that had taught her nothing solid could be trusted to stay. I started noticing things about her I hadn't let myself see before. How she remembered small details about my life, like the fact that my shift changed on Thursdays, or that I hated the sound of the microwave beeping so she'd always take my food out a few seconds early. I noticed the way her laugh, when it was genuine, came out surprised, like she wasn't used to feeling that light. I noticed that I had started looking forward to coming home, not because of the apartment itself, but because of the possibility that she'd be in the kitchen, and we'd talk about nothing and everything until one of us realized it was far too late and we both had somewhere to be in the morning. But healing isn't a straight line, and Maren's grief didn't disappear just because she'd let someone in. There were nights when she went quiet again, when she'd retreat back into her room and I'd hear that same muffled crying through the wall. And I had to learn that my job wasn't to fix her pain but to make sure she knew she didn't have to carry it entirely alone. There was one particularly hard night, almost a month after she'd told me about her father, when she knocked on my door well past midnight, her face pale, and told me she'd been looking at old photos of her family, and couldn't stop the spiral of guilt and anger and grief tangling together in her chest. I didn't have answers that night either. I just made her tea, sat with her on my bed, and let her talk until the words ran out and exhaustion finally took over. It was during one of those long, unguarded nights that she told me something that stuck with me long after, something I think about even now. She said that for years she had believed that leaving her family meant she had failed at love, that walking away from people who were supposed to love her unconditionally meant something was fundamentally broken inside her. She said she had spent so long believing she didn't deserve softness, that when she felt safe with me, it terrified her more than it comforted her, because safety had never lasted in her life before. I told her that surviving an unsafe home wasn't a failure of love. It was proof that she understood, even as a teenager, that she deserved better than what she was being given, and that recognizing that was its own kind of strength most people never have to develop. Something shifted in her after that conversation. I watched her start therapy a few weeks later, something she told me she'd been avoiding for years out of fear that unpacking everything would break her completely. She started sleeping better. She started cooking again, something she told me she used to love before her home life made even simple joys feel unsafe. She started smiling more easily, not the careful, practiced smile she used to give strangers, but something looser, something real, and through all of it, I found myself falling for her in a way I hadn't expected and couldn't have predicted from those first distant, polite months of living together. I didn't say anything about it for a long time because I was terrified of complicating something so fragile, of making her feel like the safety I'd offered came with strings attached. But one evening, months after that night on the kitchen floor, she came home from a long day, dropped her bag by the door, and without a word, walked over and hugged me the way you hug someone when you finally fully trust they won't let go. She told me that for the first time in years, she felt like she had a home that wasn't built on fear, and that home wasn't the apartment itself. It was the fact that I had never once made her feel like her pain was inconvenient. I told her then what I probably should have said months earlier, that somewhere between the sticky notes on the fridge and the late-night conversations and the hoodie that had somehow become hers as much as mine, she had stopped being my roommate and started being the person I most wanted to come home to. She cried again that night, but it was a different kind of crying, the kind that comes from relief instead of grief, the kind that happens when someone finally believes they're allowed to be loved without conditions. We're still figuring things out, still learning how to build something steady out of two people who both know what it feels like to have the ground disappear beneath them. Some nights are still hard for her, and honestly, some nights are hard for me too, because loving someone who has been hurt as deeply as she has means learning patience you didn't know you had. But I think about that night often, the one where I came home and found her sitting on our kitchen floor wrapped in my hoodie, because it taught me something I carry with me now in every relationship I have. Sometimes the people who seem the most closed off are simply waiting for someone to sit down next to them without demanding they explain themselves first. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of someone you love, or maybe reminded you of yourself, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible, that safety can be rebuilt, and that sometimes the smallest gestures, like not asking for a hoodie back, can mean more than any grand declaration ever could. Your support means everything to this channel and helps these stories reach the people who need them most. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Comment below and tell me about a moment when someone's quiet kindness changed your life, or a time when you were the one who sat down next to someone who needed it most. I read every single comment, and I promise you your story matters just as much as this one. Marin still wears that hoodie sometimes even now. And every time I see her in it, I don't think about the fabric or the fading color or the coffee stain that never quite came out. I think about the courage it took for her to admit out loud that she needed something to hold on to. And I think about how grateful I am that on that particular night, I came home late enough to find her and not too late to stay,